We ended the last lecture module with a discussion of how concepts facilitate cognitive economy. We know that concepts, like words or phrases, allow one to think of the world in more general terms, thereby focusing one's mind on a smaller, more manageable, and highly relevant set of information. This balancing act between too much or too complex information and too little or irrelevant information doesn't always optimize cognition, but it proves necessary to effective cognition all the same. Concepts also provide the basic elements with which one encodes, organizes, and retrieves one's knowledge about the world. For example, suppose I was to ask you, have you read the best-selling novel of the 19th century? You might have no idea how to answer that. You might have no clue as to what that book might be. However, if I ask that same question using the book's title, the question becomes easier for you to answer. Much easier, in fact. If I ask you, have you read Uncle Tom's Cabin, which happens to be the best-selling novel of the 19th century, you'll have no trouble in answering. You may recognize the first question or the embedded noun phrase as an instance of referential opacity. That is, a case where the intentional meaning one associates with various words or phrases doesn't accurately mirror the extension of those words or phrases, in that it doesn't pick out their reference clearly for you. Since one's concept serves as a means by which one gets a hold of the world, and through which one encodes, organizes, and retrieves one's knowledge of the world, one's ability to properly categorize experience affects one's ability to assess relevant knowledge and to make appropriate inferences. So much like the terms in our language, concepts have an intentional meaning and an extensional meaning. They get these meanings because, like terms, concepts are really just bits of the world that we use to refer to other bits of the world. In the case of concepts, we can identify two sorts of intentional meaning. On the one hand, the information guiding categorization when one conceptualizes an object, property, event, or relation under a category. On the other hand, the larger body of information encoded, organized, and retrieved through one's concepts after categorization. Likewise, concepts like terms have an extensional meaning consisting in the total collection of objects, properties, events, or relations that rightly or wrongly our categories subsume. Whenever one miscategorizes an object, property, event, or relation, one potentially falls victim to a failure in encoding, organization, and retrieving knowledge. One likewise falls victim to such errors when one fails to recognize co-referential concepts or terms, like the best-selling novel of the 19th century and Uncle Tom's Cabin, or whenever one experiences a tip-of-the-tongue failure to categorize an object. More than just giving us bits of information, our concepts allow us to connect ideas together. If I tell you that I have a dog, you can easily infer that I own an animal, since your concepts are organized to facilitate seeing these relationships between concepts. You can likewise infer that I own a mammal. You can further infer that it is a domesticated canine of the sort that's often kept as a pet in contemporary North America. We can end this lecture module by talking about how concepts allow us to bring past experiences to our present concerns. The ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus has a fragment that is commonly translated, asserts, "You never step into the same river twice." This quote from Heraclitus expresses a central theme of early Greek philosophy. The world is constantly changing, ever in flux, never the same from one moment to the next. Indeed, the Greek philosopher Plato thought that knowledge comes from identifying and exploiting the constancies underlying experience, obscured amidst the many changes. A poignant illustration of the ability of concepts to knit our experiences together and to bond the past with the present comes in the form of a quotation from René Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy some 2,000 years later. Take, for example, this piece of wax. It is quite fresh, having been but recently taken from the beehive. It has not yet lost the sweetness of the honey it contained. It still retains somewhat the odor of the flowers from which it was gathered. Its color, figure, size are apparent to sight. It is hard, cold, easily handled, and sounds when struck upon with the finger. In fine, all that contributes to make a body as distinctly known as possible is found in the one before us. But while I am speaking, let it be placed near the fire. What remained of the taste exhales, the smell evaporates, the color changes, its figure is destroyed, its size increases. It becomes liquid. It grows hot. It can hardly be handled, and although struck upon, it emits no sound. Does the same wax still remain after this change? It must be admitted that it does remain. No one doubts it or judges otherwise. What then was it I knew with so much distinctness in a piece of wax? Assuredly, it could be nothing of all that I observed by the means of the senses, since all the things that fell under taste, smell, sight, touch, and hearing are changed, and yet the same wax remains. What should we take away from Descartes' quotation? Well, I think part of what we should take away is that the world is a dynamic and changing place, and that in order for us to survive and to thrive, we need to be able to identify patterns amidst all that dynamic change. Concepts can allow us to interact with the world in a way that focuses us upon important similarities between objects, properties, events, and relations. This facilitates our ability to identify these common and constant elements in our experiences and to record them, and then to project them onto future experiences. This is what is at the heart of a concept's ability to license inductive inferences. In learning concepts provides a way by which we can go beyond our immediately perceived experiences and call upon the past in order to project into the future. By breaking the world up in ways that facilitate seeing connections between different moments in time, we can become more facile at making inductive inferences based on our past experiences. But this needn't be the case all the time. Concepts can fail to fulfill the function of facilitating inductive inferences when categories delimited by the concept don't support induction, or when information within the concept doesn't hold true for some cases. For instance, Gall's phrenology categorizes people by linking their character traits to skull shapes. While there is some localization of brain function within particular parts of the brain, the relationship between the brain's topography and the topography of the skull is minimal at best, and there really isn't anything to be learned from examining people's skulls, particularly not things about the structure and function of the brain underneath it. So Gall just had a bad set of concepts, a bad set of categories with which he was trying to make inductive inferences. And even though he was constantly trying to collect evidence, he was never really able to make any good inductive inferences based upon his categorizations and the relationships between them, because those categories simply did not support such inferences. Let's end this module with a couple of illustrations about how surprisingly difficult it can be to detect constancies and changes amidst the flux of our experiences.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
That's right, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
And action.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.